Recording in progress. Okay, so Alan, you haven't been to any of these yet, have you?
No.
Okay, good. Right, great. So we're learning Al Haseder. We're learning the Book of Proverbs in order until we give up. Like, and we're doing it. We're taking chunks, conceptual chunks, as opposed to going verse by verse. We're taking like sections, which are coherent sections of the book. We've finished the second chapter, we're in the third chapter. And so what I think we're going to do is I'll bring it up on the screen. We'll read through the whole of the chunk that I want to look at today. It's the first 12 verses of the third chapter. And then we will break it down and go through it verse by verse afterwards and see what we can make of it. Just to review, for people who weren't here, that Book of Proverbs is very, very strange literature. It is not like other bits of the Bible. It's wisdom literature. And we're going to encounter that right from the very beginning, because the things that the Book of Proverbs are talking about is not what the rest of the Bible is talking about. It's talking about something else. And I think people have been itching to get a bit of clarity around what that thing is. And I hope that we can do a little bit more of that today, just sort of gradually get more of a sense of like what the concern is of the Book of Proverbs. What wisdom is, like it's really in pursuit of wisdom. And Cheryl made a bid last time for a particular take on it, and I think she won't be disappointed in terms of what we revealed today as well at the beginning of the third chapter. Good. All right, so let me bring it up, and then we will. And just to say that this was a form of literature that was common to the Middle East, like meaning it was prevalent in other cultures as well, and that's one of the reasons why the rabbis thought were confused by the Book of Proverbs. Should it or should it not be in the Bible? Because it's an unusual piece of literature. It doesn't have the same parochial concerns as other books of the Bible. It's not concerned with the covenant and the Shabbat and with all that kind of stuff. Its concerns lie elsewhere, with some more universal sense of what is a good life. What does it mean to lead the good life? And so it's a very different kind of literature, and it's exciting that it's included within the biblical canon. It's exciting that it was included in the Bible. Okay, so here we go, third chapter. Should be able to see that. And I'm going to read through the first 12 verses. If you want it a bit bigger, then let me know.
Yes, bigger.
Bigger. I think what I'll do, Cheryl, is I'm going to read it through once, and then when we go through it like line by line, I'll make it really big so you can just see a couple of verses.
Okay.
So, Bani, my son, Torati al tishkach u'mitzvotai yitzor libecha. Do not forget my Torah, and let your heart keep my commandments. Ki orech yamim u'shnot chayim v'shalom yosifu lach. For long days, the length of days, and years of life and peace, they will add to you. Chesed v'emet al ta'azvucha. Kindness and truth will not depart from you. Hoshreim al gargotecha, katveim al luach libecha. Fasten them around your neck, write them upon the tablet of your heart. Umatzachen v'sechel tov b'nei Elohim v'adam, and then you will find grace and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Batach el Adonai b'chol libecha, trust in God with all your heart. Ve'el binaktecha al tisha'en, and do not rely or lean on your own understanding and wisdom. Know him in all your ways. V'hu yiyasher orchotecha, and he will straighten your paths. Alti chacham beinecha, do not be wise in your own eyes. Yerei Adonai v'sor merah, fear God and turn aside from evil. Rifut tehi levasarecha, and then it shall be health for your body. V'shikui la'atzmotecha, and moisture, vitality to your bones. Kabed et Adonai mehonecha, honor God from your wealth. Umereshit kol tevuatecha, with the first fruits of all your produce. Veyimalu asamecha sova, then your storehouses will be full with plenty. V'tirosh yikavecha yifrotzi, and your vats will be bursting with new wine. Musar Adonai b'ni al tim'as, my son, do not despise the moral chastenings or moral teachings of God. V'al takot b'tochach, and do not spurn his rebuke. Ki et asher yahav Adonai yofiach, for God rebukes the person he loves. Ucha'av et ben yirtzeh, just like a father does to his beloved son. Okay, that's the bit we're going to look at today. That's the beginning of the third chapter, the first poem in the third chapter. And we'll go back to the beginning and just take it apart in more detail. Let's see. B'ni, Torati al tishkach v'mitzvotai yitzor libecha. My son, do not forget my Torah and my commandments keep in your heart. Let your heart keep my commandments. Okay. Someone have something interesting to say about that.
So, is the author Solomon in his middle age? Isn't that the traditional?
Right. So it's not. I mean, the important thing is that the speaker is a chacham, is a wise person, and he is passing down that chokhmah, that wisdom. And if you want to imagine that as Solomon, who is like archetypally wise, then that would be a fine thing to do. Whether it's like that, it's fine to think of it like that. And
I don't think of it like that, but that's the tradition that he wrote 3 books. This is the middle one,
right? And it will be fine to think. I mean, like I think historically that's not true, but you could definitely think of it as a wise person trying to pass on wisdom to his son. And each different, like there's different sections of the book which often begin with B'ni as a kind of opening, as an open statement. So like they're directed to his son.
Are there any theories on who wrote it besides Solomon?
Yes, but don't distract us, Richard. Maybe some other time. Maybe some other time. I could spend some time looking at that, but not now. Let's. I think it's enough to know actually at this stage that it was a common form of literature for the Middle East.
When was it that the sons kept commandments of the parents and not were doing their own life? When was it?
Right.
Was it ever?
Never, definitely. But that's the exhortation. That's what he's saying. He's saying, don't forget my Torah. What's the Torah and commandments that he's talking about? Is it the Torah and the commandments? Definitely.
Torah means instruction. It doesn't necessarily have a capital T.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, in this case, I mean, I think you're right. I think it would be better if I hadn't put capital T there. Actually, that Torah doesn't mean the Torah. Very clearly not. He's not saying, my son, keep the Torah. He's saying, my son, keep my Torah. My Torah, meaning
my
keep
instructions.
My instructions, like what I'm about to tell you, you have to keep, and let your heart. Yatsar, yitzor is a primitive root meaning to keep or preserve. Your heart should keep my commandments. That's a really weird formulation. What does that mean? It certainly doesn't mean like it isn't like the normal thing where people turn around to someone and say like keep the commandments. This is the commandments that you have to keep in your heart. Heart in the Bible means internality. It's like a general sense of like your inner life. So when it says mitzvotai yitzor libecha, your heart should keep my commandments. It's saying like I'm going to take the commandments that I'm going to teach you about the commandments of internality. It's the commandments of your inner life.
But if it's mitzvotai, it wouldn't be Solomon. It would be God speaking, wouldn't it? Because a person or a rabbi wouldn't talk about mitzvotai.
Don't know. You think it should be mitzvoti?
No, I think B'ni, it appears when you read to the end of the first verse, B'ni is being spoken by God. Otherwise, I think it makes sense.
I don't think it's God speaking. No, Mashiach. I don't think it's
Okay.
God speaking. I mean, if you read it like that, and I think like that, later commentators might read it like that, but I don't think that's the pshat in the thing. I think that the person who's speaking is a wise person. Like we see that all the way through the book. The book is concerned with the transmission of wisdom in the human realm from generation to generation. It's old people passing on wisdom to young people.
So mitzvot means the commandments that I've taught you.
Yeah, like the commandments which are all that I am about to teach you. Like I'm going to tell you some stuff. I'm going to tell you today that you're going to see, starting in verse 5 probably. Like there are some commandments which I'm going to teach you, but they're internal commandments. They're not commandments like keep Shabbos. They're commandments like the commandments of what a good inner life looks like. What does it mean to have a good inner life?
And to offer yourself up, your innermost feelings up to God.
Well, we'll get there, but definitely,
okay.
Definitely in verse 5, when we get there, when we start listing what these commandments are,
okay.
We'll see that God is part of that. But it's not God in the kind of parochial Jewishy sense of like the God who makes you keep Shabbat and keep kosher and stuff like that. I don't think that's what it's talking about. So it's talking about some other kind of more generic idea about what does it mean to lead a life of relationship with God. Like, what does it mean to like lead a godly life or a pious life or something like that? So it's definitely a religious book. You know, like God's a part of it. God comes up in it, but it doesn't have kind of like the normal concerns that the Bible had of keeping the covenant or something like that. It's not. I don't think it's talking that language. So I'm sure actually that Torah here is not the Torah. It's the instruction that's coming from the Father to the Son. So it says, son, I don't forget, keep it in mind what I'm about to teach you, the instructions that I'm giving you, and internalize them. Like the mitzvot of the heart is what we're interested in. We're interested in like what are the heart mitzvot? Like meaning the mitzvot of a kind of an appropriate inner life. Like what does it mean to have a good inner life? What we might call a psychological life. Like how do you what does it mean to have a good psychological life, an inner life? Next line, if that's all right, I'm going to keep moving, otherwise we'll run out of time. Ki orech yamim u'shnot chayim v'shalom yosifu. For length of days and years of life and peace will they add to you. Anyone got anything interesting to say there?
If you do keep my Torah,
yeah,
then it's not that the actual days will be lengthened physically, but they will be lengthened mentally.
Ah, interesting.
You'll get because who can say your days will physically increase, but you'll get much more out of life. So
right. So I think I'm not sure whether it's length of days, actual length of days as well, but but I think it's definitely saying what you're saying as well, because it says two things. Orech yamim is length of days, and it also says shnot chayim v'shalom, years of life and peace. It doesn't say years and life and peace. It's saying if you get your internal economy sorted, then the years that you have will be years of life and peace. Like that's a smichut. Like they'll be good. It could be a good life. Like because what you're aiming for is a kind of way of living, which will give you years of life and peace. Like it's the quality of the life that the text is alluding to here in the end of the second half of line 2. Ki orech yamim, like it's going to give you lengthy days, and shnot chayim v'shalom, years of life and peace. Meaning, like, what does it mean to have inner peace? What does it mean to have a life of peace? So
this is not the same as the commandment: honor your mother and father, so that you will have a long life. This is saying my view or my opinion is that you will improve your life by doing this, and it's not a commandment. In other words, it's advice.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I also think we're still in verses 1, 2, 3, 4. We're still in the kind of consequences. He's bigging it up at this stage. He's saying, look, if you get your inner economy sorted, if you learn what I'm about to teach you, and you internalize it, you make it in your heart, then you will have years of life and peace. Meaning,
I think you will have this. It's advice, isn't it?
Right. I think that's true. It's not God speaking. It's not a promise. It's not God speaking with a kind of divine. Oh, you're right that there are plenty of places in the Bible where, or a few places in the Bible where orech yamim is one of the things that God promises for a few different commandments, like as you say, honoring your parents, shiur haken, sending away the mother bird. There are a few places in the Bible where the explicit statement is that if you do that physical commandment, then you'll have a long life. That leads to the famous Talmudic story about the boy who was obeying his
father told him
parents.
to go up the tree, didn't he?
Exactly. His father told him to go up the tree. He was obeying his father and mother, and he was doing shiur haken, the shooing away of the mother bird. He was doing two commandments, which the Bible says explicitly that you'll get a long life if you do them. And he fell off the ladder and died. And it's one of the places where the rabbis really grapple with the question of sadiq faralo, like bad things happening to good people, because the world doesn't work like the Bible says. You know, if you follow the commandments that say you'll have a long life, you could die the next day, and they knew that. And so we'll actually, the question of theodicy and good people suffering is actually going to come back in verses 11 and 12 here as well. So so hold on to your hats, because that question does arise here in the book of Proverbs. It has a slightly different take on it as well from the state the Bible has. Okay, let's go on to 3. Chesed ve'emet al ya'azvucha. If you do following the commandments which I'm about to give you, then kindness and truth will not depart from you. Koshrem al gargerotecha. It's not a word that I know. Fasten them about your neck, like there'll be a necklace around you. Kotvei maluach lidecha. Write them upon the tablets of your heart. Kindness and truth. Chesed ve'emet won't depart from you. So we're not talking about Shabbos. We're talking about midot. We're talking about moral qualities. Some of the commentators think that this is actually part of his advice. Like literally, buy yourself a kamea, like an amulet, and write chesed.
Kamaya.
A kamea.
We used to call it.
Right. What do you call it, Alan?
Kamaya.
Kamea. Right.
Yes.
So literally, there's a suggestion here that you would fasten an amulet around your neck that would say chesed ve'emet, kindness and truth. But I don't think you have to read it like that. I think it's more metaphorical. Like I think if you follow this sort of path of inner life, then there's some basic qualities which will adhere to you, and kindness and truth, those qualities, they'll be sort of tied to you and bound to you, and they're written inside you. Right. Kotvei maluach libecha seems metaphorical, not literal, I think. So. And verse 4, and so shall you find grace and good understanding in the sight of God.
That appears in Birkat Hamazon, doesn't it?
It does. Very nice. What's the power of that, Alan? Why?
I don't know. I think they've Birkat Hamazon picks bits from all over Tanakh, and it's. I'm sure it's it is right that it does a lot of wisdom literature because it's trying to become the concept of Birkat Hamazon is it's not talking about physical commandments, is it? It's talking about being satisfied and thinking of other people and this kind of thing.
Right. Very interesting. Very nice. I mean, the implication of Beinei Elohim v'Adam, which is a phrase that's used elsewhere in the sight of God and man, is that what I'm suggesting you should do is actually something which will have an impact in terms of your interpersonal relations, how people treat you, how people see you. It's not just a God thing; it's a human thing. And if you get this right, then it will have an impact on the human realm as well as on the divine realm. Like what we're aiming for is a kind of personality, or a religious personality, which is highly desirable both in the human realm and in the divine realm. They kind of line up. You want to be the kind of person who sort of gets both right. There's a midrash which I dug out. Tanchuma says, some people are pleasing to the king, but not pleasing to the people in the king's palace. And there are other people who are pleasing to the people, but not pleasing to the king. But the righteous person, when they're pleasing before the Holy One, blessed be He, they're pleasing before the angels and before mortals. Meaning, like, we're aiming to be the kind of person who sits well with all different parts of the world. Like, if you get like your basic inner life right, you can be a potent and effective person in all sorts of different realms. It's not just in the divine realm; it's also in the human realm as well. That you're hoping that you get things right on that realm too. Okay. Now we get to the actual start of the instructions. So that's all.
I think this is an advert for therapy, Joel.
Why do you say that, Cheryl?
Well, because it's about sorting out your inner life, and you get a good, yeah, and you feel you live a better life.
Right. You want to be sorted. You want to be sorted.
Yeah.
You want to be sorted.
It is an advert for therapy.
Well, let's see what he thinks. He thinks that you should do. This is his advice. There. It's not going to be therapy, because there was no such thing as therapy.
No, there wasn't.
But maybe this is the equivalent. I don't know. Okay. So number 5 is the beginning of, I think, the Torah. This is the Torah that he has to teach, and the mitzvah, the sort of internal Torah and mitzvah stuff. Okay. Number 5. B'tach el Adonai b'chol libecha, ve'el binatecha al tishaen. Trust in God with all your internality, with all your heart, and don't rely overly on or lean too heavily on your own understanding. That's the first thing. Trust in God with all your heart, and don't rely completely on your own understanding.
And you're saying this doesn't relate to physical commandments? Because
I'm pretty sure it doesn't. No. I don't think that's what it's. I think it's more a kind of qualities, human qualities. I'll read the next one as well, just to get a bit of a sense of what I think is going on here. So, v'chol derachecha da'ehu, know him in all your ways, v'hu yasher orchotecha, and he will straighten your paths. So, know him in all your ways. Know him in all your ways means something like, I think, think what God wants from you whatever you're doing. Like, before you do anything, think to yourself, what God would want from you in that situation. Like in Brachot, in the Talmud, in Brachot takes this, Bar Kapar, one of the rabbis of the Amorim, says, Ezoi Parshak Tanashakol Gufei Torah Limba. What's the small parsha, the small verse of the Torah which all the body of the Torah relies upon it or hangs upon it? In all your ways know him, and he will straighten your paths. Meaning, like, that's the kind of basic principle about how to be in the world. That think before you act, what does God want from me to do? Know him, think about God in all your paths. Rava Amar, the Amora Rava, very important Rava, 4th generation Babylonia. Afilo Devar Avera. Even when you're committing a sin, you should be thinking, how would God want me to commit this sin? It's an amazing thing to see.
But doesn't contradict the Pirkei Avot, where these people who were supposed to be the best, and one who was keeping everything, as it should be, that was preferred, but the one who was relying on his own. And here I have impression that it encourages to be just one who obeys.
I'm not sure that I think this is obedience. I wasn't reading it as obedience. I was reading it more as reflection, because I don't think it's obedience in the sense of like following the mitzvot here. I think it's more like thinking, like, before I act, how would God want me to act? Now, Like the Rava's edition is astonishing. Rava says, like, even when you're doing a sin, think to yourself, what would be the appropriate way to sin? Like, that's astonishing. Meaning, like, you know, there are times when you have to break the rules. And what does it mean to break the rules in the way that God might want from you? Like, that it's more about the quality of action than it is in the way the Talmud understands it, than it is about obedience. It's like thinking, like, what is the right thing to do in this circumstance? And that's very fluid. That's like, because this is not about just keep the mitzvot, keep the commandments. It's more like about what is the approach to how to be in the world. If I had to give you some kind of epithet, some simple wisdom about, like, you know, you might say to your kid, like, think before you act. Think, is this the right thing to do? Okay. Now that's not the same as saying to someone, you know, follow the Torah. It's not that at all. It's more like this is pure, like simple statements of like wisdom approach to life. So like stop before you act. Don't always think that you know the right answer. Number 5. Don't always think that you understand the situation. It might be that God has some other requirement for you. So like be a little bit less trusting about your own understanding of situations. Maybe the situation is bigger. Okay. Like maybe like so number 5 is like maybe the situation is more complicated than you understand it, and you need to think more broadly about a scenario that you find yourself in. Maybe God knows more than you do. Number 6, like know him in all your ways, meaning like stop and think before you act. Completely like don't act impetuously. Like be someone who pauses and reflects on what the right moral action is. So they're very broad statements of like approach to an inner life, I think.
That number 6 reminds me of the bit from Matthew.
Yes.
Straight is the gate, and narrow is the path which leadeth unto life.
Oh, that's beautiful. Say that again, Richard.
Straight is the gate, narrow is the path which leadeth unto life.
Where's that in Matthew? Do you remember?
I just looked it up. Matthew 7:14.
Yes, thank you.
Matthew,
as in this is wonderful book written by André Gide, which is called Straight is the Gate, which is where I got it.
Very nice. Striking the path. Very interesting.
It must have been taken directly from here, you know, because of the gate straight and the path.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I will try and dig that out. That's really interesting. Thank you, Richard. That's great.
So my view on 5 and 6 is you've got to have a good knowledge of all the commandments or all the to be able to know what God would want in your situation, because there are a few commandments which God makes you: don't oppress the stranger, love your neighbor as yourself, return the lost property to its owner, this kind of thing. But if you look at all the commandments, they're only a very small number which are sort of ethical. So you've got to have a good knowledge of Torah with a capital T to know what God wants you to do.
Look, I think that way of thinking is not what the book of Proverbs is overly concerned about. I don't think it's like you can't get closure. How to put this nicely? Like I think sometimes there's a kind of what some authors say is a kind of hyper halachic view of the Bible, which says the Jewish culture is really all about just a set of rules that you have to follow, and if you got the rules down, you'd be okay. And that way of thinking it's one way of viewing Judaism. It was like Soloveitchik pushed that way of thinking. It's a sort of like Judaism is really about obedience in a way, and if you could just crack what the rule was in any given situation, you'd know what the right way to behave was. And I think that is a particular way of thinking about Judaism, but I don't think that's the central way the book of Proverbs is looking at like a good life. I think it's much more fluid. Like if you read the accounts of like tribal justice, the person who hands down justice in many tribal societies is not the person who knows the rules so well. It's the person who's wisest. You see something like, So it's not clear, for example, when Moses is choosing people to judge the people in the book of Exodus, that he was choosing people who knew the most. I think he was choosing Chachamim, and the wise person who sits in the gates, to whom you go, who delivers justice or delivers or helps people to resolve disputes. It's often in the human realm that those disputations take place, and the person who's best at solving those problems is not necessarily the person who knows the most. It might be the person who's the wisest and who knows how to resolve disputation. So I think that there's some other way of approaching the world that this book is dealing with that isn't quite so caught up in the question of rule following. That would be my take on it. I'm not. I'm just pushing back slightly there, Alan. It's clear that lurking in the background is all that rule stuff. Like this is a book that's much later than the book of the 5 books of Moses. Like they know there are rules in there. It's just that there's some other type of literature here that's being articulated, which is not listing rules that you have to keep. It's more listing midot, or qualities that you might bring that would enable you to go through life the right way with integrity. And those qualities are kind of inner qualities. They're like the inner life that parallels the outer life. So we're talking about the mitzvot of the heart here, or the wisdom of the heart, and how to apply the rules, what to do in any given. I don't think he can tell you what to do in any given situation. He's just giving you heuristics, rules of thumb that you might need to follow. Stop, trust in God. Don't always assume that you're right. Think that what would God want from me in this situation. So these are more like they're heuristics rather than rules, I would say. Yeah. Let's go through a few more of them, and then we're running out of time. Number 7, Alti chacham ba'einecha. Don't be too wise. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Yirei et Adonai v'sor mirah. Fear God and turn aside from evil. Meaning, don't think that you have all the answers. Don't think that you haven't got any wisdom to acquire from elsewhere in the world. Don't think that you've arrived in terms of your own wisdom. Always be open to knowledge and learning. Fear God and turn aside from evil. Just do the right thing. Meaning, oftentimes there's a choice, and you have to think will I do the right thing or the wrong thing? Fear God and do the right thing, even if that's scary, or even if fear God more than you fear the person who's going to when you're making those kind of moral choices about what to do in life, and you have to make a decision about whether to be brave or whether to be expedient. Be brave because God's watching, and so you have to fear God and turn from evil, meaning just don't do what's expedient. Do what's right as opposed to what's expedient. That's another piece of life wisdom. It's when you're confronted by the real messiness of life, and you have to make a choice about whether to do the right thing or whether to do the thing that's easiest, then fear God and do the right thing. These are life approaches. I think the rules of thumb or heuristics. And number 8, if you do all that stuff, I think we would say refuah tihyeh lebesarecha. There's a bet missing from the original text, according to most academics. That if you do that stuff, it will kind of heal your body, and it will moisten your bones. The shikui, the hashkot, means to wet, to give water to. It will keep you vibrant. If you can follow those life advice, then it will be good for you. It will be good for you. It'll be good for your body. You'll lead a good, healthy life.
It's rather nice when it says moisture to your bones, which are dry.
Yes.
You're emphasizing it to a very high degree because your bones can't normally be moistened.
Yeah, it's a funny phrase, isn't it?
It's a lovely phrase actually, because it's taking something, it's saying, look how fantastic it could be. It's more than abnormal. Yeah,
I agree. Although for those of us who are getting old and drying out, I suppose it means it is quite resonant, the idea of keeping your body healthy and supple and moist. Number 9, kabed et Adonai mehonecha. Honor God from your wealth. Umereshit kol tvuatecha. Honor God from your wealth. Be generous. Do the right thing with your money and with the first fruits of your produce.
I always like that bit about the first fruits, because
Yeah.
you would normally be wanting to eat your first fruits yourself.
You would.
And that what it's saying is, put that aside for yourself. Put yourself almost second. Deny yourself, because denying yourself can, give you greater rewards in a whole raft of ways.
It's counterintuitive, but yes, like
Yeah,
as you
not to
say,
take the first fruits. You're waiting for the grapes to ripe, and then you're going to give them to the temple or whatever.
yeah, totally. I mean, it's an attitude to life, isn't it? Thinking that your wealth is also something with which you honor God, as opposed to just enjoy the benefits of. But the flip side of that is in verse 10, that if you do that, paradoxically, if you do honor God with your wealth, then the yimalu asamecha sova, then your storehouses will be filled with plenty, the tiroshika yukavecha yufrotsu, and your vats will burst with new wine. Like you will be wealthy. So there's no, I don't know whether that's literal or metaphorical, but the consequence of being generous and honoring God with your money is to actually have plenty, as opposed to being impoverished. Doing the right thing with your money isn't bad for you in terms of your wealth. It's good for you. So these are rules of, I think, again, Alan, this is like, I don't know, that's not a, like, to honor God from your wealth. It's such a general term, as opposed to like a specific mitzvah of tzedakah or a specific mitzvah of I don't know, of like leket or payah or something. I'm thinking it's a more general meta statement about money. So I think the advice is very broad brush here, as opposed to narrow detail. And maybe you're right, actually. Maybe the detail is in the background. You know what I mean? Maybe the kind of fine print is the Torah, and this is a more. Sorry.
In verse 10, is the inference that you will run your business better if you are ethical and moral?
I don't know. Or is it magic?
Yeah, this is what I'm asking. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a reward. You see, the question is, what should you do with your wealth?
Yeah.
And what you should not do with your wealth is you want to spend it on frivolities for yourself.
Yeah.
Don't spend it on your children and your wife, but use it to honor God. So do it for mitzvah.
Do it for the community, do it for the temple, do it for things that really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then the reward might not be actually stored house filled with plenty, but it shall be like that.
Right, maybe.
That shall burst, whether physically or metaphorically, that's what your reward shall be.
So here's the sting in the tail.
Yeah.
The sting in the tail, the last two verses here, 11 and 12. Musar Adonai b'ni al tim'as. The instruction of God, my son, don't despise.
Don't be what?
Don't despise the
right, yeah, sorry.
The moral instruction of God. Don't spurn his rebuke. Because God rebukes who he loves. And just like a father does to his son that he really likes.
So this word Musar is like there's a Musar movement, isn't there, which follows all the ethical commandments, I suppose you'd call them.
Yeah, right. It was a sort of lit back response to Hasidism. We have Musa classes at the yeshiva. It's basically an attempt to sort of take apart the midot, the human qualities, good moral qualities, and then focus in on them. That the Muslim movement was a.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what this proverb is talking about, isn't it? All the way through, it's talking about Musar, which is ethical qualities.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. Here, Musar might have a slightly different whiff to it. Like, what? Why do I think this is the sting in the tail? When it says, what does it mean? Don't spurn God's rebuke, or like because because God rebukes who he loves.
Well, rebuking, I mean, we've talked about this before. Rebuking is very often counterproductive.
Yeah.
So if you tell off your children, they sometimes become more stubborn. So therefore, what it's trying to say is, don't do that like a child.
Mm.
You know, rise above.
Right.
Rise above the fact that you will, you know, how do you tell your children to do things? You let them work it out themselves, and you listen to them and you communicate with them. But if you tell your children not to do something, quite often the natural inclination is for them to do the exact opposite.
Mm.
And what it's saying is, don't fall into that trap.
Of doing the opposite.
Yeah.
Right.
This word relates to the tochacha, doesn't it? The tochacha is a list of horrible things that are going to happen to you if you don't keep God's commandments. So it's saying, don't spurn his tochacha. In other words, you know what God's going to do to you if you don't follow his ways. Right. So they're saying, be aware of that, isn't it? And don't dismiss the tochacha.
I think it might be going even further than that here. But sorry, I think Joanna had her hand up. Sorry.
I really need your help to enlarge my understanding, because for me, for obvious reasons, coming from Poland, it sounds like a Christian teaching that I don't understand.
Which one?
You know, be good and everything. Everything. And also I have in head your teaching from maybe 12 years ago or something about being a friar. You remember?
Yeah.
We had this discussion.
Yeah.
And really, I need to have my head not to be so narrowly rebelled against, this understanding.
Yeah.
So thank you for your help. Because
No. I understand what you're saying. Like, look, I think it's a very different piece of literature, and I think it was read by people of different religions. So, look, we will get into the question of whether you have to bend over or whether we should turn the other cheek. Like when someone abuses you, that's an important question. And as Alan, like we have detailed texts on questions about whether the right thing to do if someone abuses you, should you allow yourself to be abused a second time, or if someone cheats you, should you lend to them again, or something. And Judaism is generally not in favor of people being idiots, but here, this is the book of Proverbs paints with quite a broad brush.
I think that Judaism does teach you to be idiots, really.
Sometimes.
It does teach you to be good.
Right. Sometimes, look, there's a time and a place for being an idiot, a moral idiot. There's a time and a place for being a moral idiot. I think I don't know whether what you're saying is the discomfort here with the whole section that we've read is that it's such a broad brush thing about goodness. It's such a broad brush and an open kind of approach to like leading the good life, that you want more detail, you want flesh on the bones, you want kind of to get into the particulars, as opposed to kind of something that maybe feels more Christian, which is just like, well, lead a good life in like with all your ways know him. The Kol Nefesh, know him in all your ways. Like that, I don't know. I mean, that you could say like that Christianity took that and rejected mitzvah, and I think that was, we've had a couple of times where there's been interfaith dialogue in the shul where we've had Christian teachers who've come and said exactly that. Like, you don't need mitzvah, you don't need details of a good life, because it's enough just to say I'm pursuing love, or love is enough to say. I've had a couple of sessions like that, and I'm skeptical of the idea that you can dump the details of what it means to lead a good life. But this literature exists within the tradition. Like we also have this this wisdom literature, which is
no. This is why I love you. You know, I love this. Do not always assume that you are right, and this is something that speaks to me.
Right.
But the other part, it's it scares me because it scares me because I come from a Christian country, and they were killing us for centuries with these teachings.
Right.
So I really need your help to overcome this.
Right. It's true. Look, I'm not saying this is the everything, but it's something. You're right. That the critique, like there's a kind of bad interfaith dialogue between Jews and Christians when people really aren't listening to each other, where Christians say to Jews, look, your religion is one of law and it's desiccated and dry, and you have a hateful God. And the Jews turn back and say, look, you're a God of love, but you've been killing us for 2,000 years. And it would be better to have rules than to say that you're following a God of love, but to actually have a God of anger and death. So that's a very miserable conversation to take when that conversation takes place between Jews and Christians, and you have to go beyond that. You do have to go beyond that, and I think that we have this literature in our canon, and it reads more like the New Testament. Let's say maybe that's what you're objecting to. It reads more like a general wisdom, but it's interesting that it's in our tradition. We also have that wisdom literature. They managed to bring that word, that way of talking, into the tradition, into our tradition as well. I mean, at some point, it will be interesting. Maybe I can try and show you how the rabbis allowed themselves to include this literature in the Bible. Maybe that would be an interesting question. Like, what were the rabbis thinking when they brought this kind of literature into the Bible? And there's some particular things they did to it that made them feel more comfortable with allowing it to be in the Bible. But I'm gonna hold off on that, because I want you to just be uncomfortable with the literature stuff for a while first, before we solve that problem and show how the rabbis did make this integrated more deeply with the rest of biblical literature, because they did. The rabbis did read the book of Proverbs a particular way that allowed them to sit with it more comfortably, because they had your discomfort. But let's maybe do that in a couple of weeks' time or next week, because it sounds like we need to develop a bit of thinking. But
you read the country.
No, but I want to bring it. There's a very, very famous text, which I think there's a very famous text, I think, which will show, which will allow you to think maybe more comfortably, sit more comfortably with it. Last thing, my read on the 11 and 12, verses 11 and 12. I think it's actually the sting in the tail, because I think what it's saying is, I think Musa here is also from Yassar, meaning maybe pain, and I think it's saying something like, when things go pear-shaped, like when you are rebuked by God in the sense that life actually turns out badly and things aren't good for you, then don't run away. Like when things are bad, when God rebukes you, meaning when life actually doesn't go well, and your vineyards are not producing, and your health is not good, when everything is actually going badly, don't spurn his rebuke, meaning don't run away and say maybe God hates me, because like you could say, okay, fine, I'll lead the good life, but if things are good, I'm good, and if things are bad, then I'll know that it was stupid. And verse 12 says, because what you have to learn to say is, actually, the bad, when life turns bad, that's in some way a rebuke that I have to be able to learn from, as opposed to run away from. I have to be able to take it on the chin, say that this is an act of love, integrate it into my life, learn from it, and carry on being good. Now there is a difficult element to that, but this is theodicy. This is saying, this is a particular biblical response to what happens how you should understand something bad happening to you. Like, God loves you God loves who he rebukes in the same way as a parent tells off their children as an act of love. So God tells off his people, even on the individual level, as an act of love. And you should read it like that. So you should read the suffering, or when things go badly, you should read that in some way as God wanting to help you, or to as loving you as opposed to hating you. Now you could abuse that idea, but I think the sting in the tail is saying something like, it isn't that life is going to, if you follow all these rules and try and lead a good life, then everything's going to be great. Things can be very hard in life, but even the hard things in life should be taken as a tochacha, as an act of rebuke, and then you have to come back to God. You mustn't run away as on the basis of things being difficult.
But the tochacha says that if you don't follow my commandments, these bad things will happen to you. And this is what makes people, or Orthodox rabbis, tell people to check their mezuzahs when bad things happen, because you haven't kept the dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's of all the commandments.
Yeah, and I think, that is consistent with. It's not actually so consistent with biblical theology, because I think actually on the level of the Bible, a bit more detail maybe than we need, but the Bible God is less into what the rabbis came to call hashgacha pratit. The Bible isn't so accepting of the idea that God gives each person their just reward, and it happens because a lot of that stuff about reward and punishment in the Bible in the 5 books is more on a national level.
Okay.
The idea of individual reward and punishment is a very strong rabbinic idea, but the Bible is actually really not that. The Bible says, like, if you as a people keep my commandments,
right,
then I'm gonna on a collective level give you reward and punishment. And the Bible's really concerned with the collective, not with the individual. But the rabbis were really into the idea that the individual is rewarded and punished. But they also have the flip side. The rabbis also said, sometimes you're climbing up a tree to fulfill the obligation of honoring your parents, and you're doing shiur and wafting the mother bird away, and you're doing everything right, and you still fall and die. And the rabbis were very clear; they knew that was the nature of reality. And here is another answer to the problem of theodicy. So I think these verses 11 and 12 is an answer to the problem of how you should think about what happens when the world goes wrong for you. And the answer is you should think that that's God loving you, which is a very weird thing to say. It's like a kid who gets smacked by their father, and the father says, "Well, I smacked you because I love you, because I don't want you to run in the street," or something like that. It isn't. I didn't smack you because I hate you. I smacked you because I love you. If I didn't care about you, I'd never have smacked you. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about smacking these days. Maybe we don't smack children anymore, but my parents, like my mum, used to smack me.
They just banned it in Wales.
Oh, there you go. Right. My homeland is their banned smacking, but here, yeah.
Why do you take it the world has gone wrong for you rather than that you have done wrong?
Yeah, you should assume that you've got something to learn from this and you've done something.
Yes, I know, but why do you say the world has gone wrong for you rather than if you've done something which is wrong? Is it not just saying that in a quite simple way, and then God is going to rebuke you, and you should to accept that?
Yeah, I think it is saying that, but the net result is like the last few lines here are definitely like tempering the sense that everything is just it's not like a doctrine of gospel of wealth or something like that, that if you follow all the rules everything will automatically, there's never a blip on the horizon, and you things are going to go pear-shaped, and then you should view that as an act of love from God, like what they later rabbinic tradition came to call Yisurim shel Ahava, the sufferings of love. There's a whole long sugya in the Bavli in the Sefer Brachot about Yisurim shel Ahava, the suffering that you suffer as an act of divine love, and the roots of that are definitely here. Like the idea that that you should look at your life. Maybe this is maybe I'm kind of mirroring in a way what Alan doesn't like, but the first thing you might think if something goes wrong is, well, what did I do? Like, take responsibility, take it on the chin. Like, maybe I did do something wrong. I don't think you should look at your mezuzah particularly, but I think we should think, what am I doing wrong? How have I screwed up? And that isn't necessarily a bad you know, stay in relationship with God, as it were. Don't run away. It's not that God loves hate. God doesn't hate you. God loves you. So, you know, God loves you, and that's why he's interested in you. If he wasn't interested, he'd never have forgiven. Something like that. So I think that's the kind of, like, it's not assuming that everything will always turn out right with you and your storehouses will be full and life will be great. Like, no, maybe your harvest will fail. And the first thing you should think if your harvest fail is, well, maybe I didn't act well in the world. Maybe there's something I could have done better and I screwed up. Joanna, final word, then we should just finish off.
No, it just what you are just saying, it is, and Alan is saying, it's a lot of this in aha.
Yeah.
That maybe we did something wrong.
Right. Yeah.
So
right.
we have other examples of this.
Right.
But thank you. It was extremely helpful, as usual, what you said to me to calm me down.
All right, good. Yeah, so we'll continue. I think maybe I'll try and bring a text which will maybe calm you even further. But just to end today, and thank you to everyone for coming. Look, this is a very, very different kind of literature, as I've said before. It's a kind of literature that maybe we're not used to. It's a Torah of one's inner life as opposed to a Torah of one's outer life. I think they're interested in like how you do the inside life as opposed to the outside life. They're interested in midot, qualities that you might want to develop, and approaches, heuristics, rules of thumb, approaches to like what it means to lead a good life. And the reward is it's a wise person speaking. It's not God speaking. It's kind of in the human realm, like someone wise trying to pass on kind of these life rules to their children, simple rules that their kids can take on that would allow them to take a path, thoughtful and a good path through life that will also then lead to leading a good life. And so in that sense, it's a very different kind of literature from the literature that we're used to in the rest of the Bible. Whether we're convinced by it, I don't know. Whether it feels too non-Jewish or something like that, whether it feels like it's too disconnected from the rest of the biblical tradition, I'll try and address that in a future session to try and show how the rabbis integrated this kind of wisdom literature into earlier biblical literature to make it all kind of sit together. So I think, Leon's here, to be honest. Welcome. So thanks to everyone. We're ploughing on. Next time we'll do the second half of the third chapter, and I will. If anyone wants, let me know if you want me to send you out the sources so you have a look at my translation. So any translation I think would be worth looking at if you look on Safari. Anyone got a final comment before we finish? Nice to see people who haven't been here before, and otherwise we will resume next week when I'll be in the UK.
Thank you very much.
England next weekend, so I hope to see you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.